screw in prototype number 2. And we're set. So down here we have like just under 16, or just under 17. Here we're right at 17, here we're right at 17, and here we're at like 16. But that will be obviously all relative to what we end up cutting off. So
which would be before.
Yeah.
Should be like right in the center.
Yeah, I mean, we could take a, it wouldn't be that bad to, you know, come up to here and then do, was it 46? Mm-hmm. It was 46, okay. Yeah, because I kind of want to be in one or the other. Now, if it was a little bit long, we could squish it. We just don't want it to be short, right? So let's cut it right here and go with what we want to have happen. And if that doesn't happen, we can trim some off of that other edge, which will be really easy to do because it's screwed together. Yeah. All right. Good?
Yep.
Good.
All right. You get the cutting tools?
Yeah. Is that skill saw?
I think it's inside.
Okay. Good eyes. It's interesting, it sort of retains its shape.
Huh.
You know, what's really cool about this is like, the tire wants to do a certain thing. And with this prototype, what we did is like put a longer screw between each one to try to provide something because we assumed that the tire was flat. Then when we screwed it together, we realized that like by trying to keep it straight, we lost the battle because you just have this like moon bow thing, which would be kind of, I don't know, like a weird, I don't know, like Robert Venturi.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but then the other thing we realized with that is when you try to keep it straight, it also wants to like hug the ground. So then we're like riding on a less even surface, and then it would also flex down with the high volume of traffic on it. So then when we figured out like, okay, well, if you want to get it straight, how do you do it? We kind of came to the realization that, well, the tire is going to have to undulate. When it undulates, then it will sit flat. And we always sort of thought, well, the weight of all the tires together will be the thing that forces its straightness or its adherence to what we wanted it to do, just because it's simply so heavy. But you can see that moon bow is just about the same amount of tires as this prototype, and the design is way better, the yield is way better. We're incorporating gravel into the path, which is great because now we have enhanced permeability, And we also have a path surface that's a lot more reliable. When I say reliable, I mean from the point of view of someone who's using a recreational trail. There's a lot less, they say, there's a lot less hesitancy when you see a material that you recognize. And so it's a lot easier to sort of think about something if you are invited to think about it, if you're familiar with the process, versus something like that. The other great thing about this particular one is we can choose to, which we haven't done a prototype of this yet, but we can choose to make the undulations multiple different sizes, so we can begin to look at the program that we have and determine hierarchies for, okay, in this area, this is a place where there's going to be heavier traffic, so we want a denser weave, which will basically create like little blocks out of the gravel infill, where we want it to be maybe for like runners and we want additional absorption. We can, you know, the entire size of this piece can be one of these sort of, I like to call it like an eyeball shape, for lack of better terms. And this way it's almost similar to don't step on a crack or you'll break your mother's back, by virtue of the larger areas. You could really assimilate the tire being the crack on the sidewalk and the gravel being the cement. The prototype is really valuable, first of all because the tires are not a problem in the environment anymore. In our neighborhood we have tires all over the place. Like you drive down any alley, there are tires everywhere. So the material is super easy to come by. And then furthermore, it lasts forever. I mean, the whole issue with why tires are such an environmental hazard is there's very little we can do with them. And the carbon footprint associated with doing the right thing, of which only 22% of our 282 million tires are doing the right thing, that being either recycled for athletic turfs or burned for fuel, but in an appropriate, moderated setting. We still have 78% of the tires that are either in alleys, creating breeding grounds for disease-carrying mosquitoes and other vermin, or they're just stores somewhere. They're like a problem for another day. So we're sort of taking that permanence of the tire and putting it into an application which needs permanence. It's going to be walked on, ridden on, driven over. It's going to be through the freeze. It's going to be through the thaw. Rubber has the material properties to do so. The only thing that destroys rubber is friction from driving it, which is why we replace our tires. You won't have that sort of friction from a tennis shoe, a stroller, rubber on rubber, a bicycle wheel on this path. And furthermore, the implication to add to it is humongous. As we get tires, we can expand the path. There's no, 3-week turnaround where you're having to drive out a tar truck once every few years to, pick up the cracks from the thaws and everything. With this, it's just, it's there. It will remain there. Our oldest roads in the United States are made out of gravel. So we're just taking it one step further, giving it a little bit more firmness, and then taking one of the few cons with a gravel road, which is its ability to erode, and reducing it because we're confining it. Further, as a design element, this prototype has the ability to become a cellular weave. So if you were to imagine like a paint by number or a pixelated pattern where an image is formed by the density of dots and the spacing of those different, we'll call them paints or numbers, you can have a whole possibility of design options. You can have the sort of harder edge to the pathway, or you can have a sort of slowly graduated edge, where some of those cells could be gravel, and then every once in a while you have native plants where you just have a base of soil and those can grow through. Then eventually it just sort of tapers off. So while it is a brand new project, it sort of has this feeling of sort of natural occurrence. And we like to take the tire and do even more with it. The tire, as you see here, we're using the treads. What comes off of every tire is 2 sidewalls. So what do we do with that? We don't know. I mean, a simple answer is you have a park, you need trash bins. Well, you don't have to chain it to anything because no one's going to pick up 45 layers of sidewall. So you basically are taking this trash and finding a way for, you know, the use of a bad cliche, making it treasure. Certainly a garbage can is no treasure, but if no one has to worry about it and it comes about as a byproduct of the process with which you are shooting for, then it's just hands down. It's almost an unimpeccable idea. You throw a bag in it, you take the bag out, the garbage can remains. We've also come up with seating elements, and now starting to look at combining multiple layers of these treads and sort of working with this concept, which has really gained a lot of footing in terms of making a prototype that makes sense by working with its properties, by using the corrugation with which a tread is turned around the wheel, and looking at alternative scales. So creating larger elements which, instead of just being a flat application, are gradually stepped. So now we can begin to, at a smaller scale, retain small changes in topography. So we can really play with the landscape, and this sort of tire path can become something other than just a path. It can become an erosion prevention system. It can grow and scale even larger and be offset in different elevations to create a sort of truth to the material. Whereas before, this is set in and you are only seeing the tread. As this starts to change elevation, you're creating all these small plateaus which are retained by the tread. So as you're progressing down the path, you begin to see the tread, still in its same orientation, begin to become visible in its other material form, which is not only from a point of vertical structure, but as a point of lateral reinforcement. So that's my soapbox. I'm
Take my money.
pretty excited.
Take my money. Oh wait, I don't.
I'm really excited to have the opportunity to share this with the community and to sort of use the tire, which at first started as this sort of far-fetched idea, to actually create an element of conversation with people in the community, because it's not always easy to walk into a community where people come from different backgrounds, come from different cultures. The color of their skin is different. There's a great problem in Milwaukee with a level of segregation. It's particularly very blatant in our neighborhood. I can go 3 blocks over and the houses all drop price. Same exact house would be like a third of the price. So what we want to do is sort of take an area which we are well aware is underserved, which we're not surprised why it is, and start to try to billow out this silver lining that River West is in terms of representative sample of thriving diversity in a town that has never been known for such. So we think that that tire is just what seems silly in the beginning is actually a great point of conversation. When we first go to the neighborhood, people look at us like, you're the guy that's dumping all these tires in our neighborhood. And when they realize that, I don't know why the hell you're doing this, but you're actually removing this burden, this visual eyesore from their neighborhood, the conversation is like that. Why are you doing it? What are you doing? It's like an invitation to speak with someone, and we've sort of started in looking at this space, this industrial rail corridor, by looking at what resources are available. And while at first it seemed like, oh, there's a tire, let's see if there's something that can be done with this. What we found to be the most important resource, the real catalyst, is not the tire, but it's the people. The people are the voice, the people are the support, the people are the labor. The people are the buy-in. A project that is well thought out and creatively and successfully realized under a budget can be appreciated by spectators, by tourists, by things like that. I think a truly successful project is something for which there's a sense of ownership and a level of propriety. This also sort of adds a level of long-keeping, maybe I should say safekeeping, because with the idea that it's something that was done by and for that community, there's a level of pride. And with that level of pride comes a level of awareness and activity. And those sort of things are exactly what we find neighborhoods like this need, especially ones that are terribly segregated. We need to remove the fear, or this sort of notion of the unknown, or the dark, or the vacant, by adding activity. And so, as this project has sort of gone from a material study to a social project to, what can we recycle from the site, what's been really captivating is this sort of engagement of the people who live in the community, and the support that this sort of really strange idea can begin to enervate. What was one of my favorite things when I presented this to the Block Club in Williamsburg Heights was afterwards I was talking to a couple of people and asking, do you find this to be a positive idea? Would you consider signing this petition to let our alderwoman know that this is it's not a pipe dream, that we are and can make it happen? A gentleman came up to me, introduced himself. His name was Keon, and Keon said, man, how did you asphalt, tires? Where's the relationship? He's like, you remind me of college, man. You smoking that good stuff? How the hell did you think of that? And it's just hilarious to me that an idea which people want to claim is a great idea is just simple logic. It's how do we get back to working with one another? How do we get back to working with our hands? And seeing that sort of engagement, I think, is, I wouldn't call it a lost art, but it's much fewer and far between that sort of concrete thing or a outdoor activity can start to have people inquire, ask questions. It's sort of curiosity that a lot of us have lost. We go from this point in our day to the next point, to the next point, oftentimes really not perked by anything unusual in it. understand for my own sake the level of thoughtfulness and engagement always happens. I shouldn't say always, but is often spawned by a level of speculation or curiosity. So, yeah, I think when the tire project started, we knew that the answer was going to be extremely simple, and at times it's really frustrating because you know the solution. This is a solution. Is like not a crazy thing, but we had the tires turn flat. We had them sitting out in the sun. We had them like perforated. We tried to cut little slits to get them to do what we wanted. We tried to stitch them together with bicycle tubes, fold them, cut them, and really the solution requires very little tooling and is not something that you know, the average adult could not do. And furthermore, there's a sort of improvisation to with how this goes together. It's not a pattern. You're not like following per se an instruction. There's a lot of user input in the density of these hatches, what part is filled with gravel, what part becomes soil, and then this sort of cellular matrix then can also begin to define space, community garden plots. It can also start to have a density which expands and contracts, and I think then can allow the sort of aggregate process of this to become a mirror of those who created it. When you go down the path 5 years from now, you can remember that one time when, you know, you screwed two things in a row, but it doesn't matter. It's still a gravel retained path, and it sort of adds a level of maybe unintentional visual complexity, but there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's just right that you're part of your neighborhood. And for people like myself who just live across the way, it's great to remove that that precipice, that I wouldn't necessarily call it fear, but the unknown, and see if by virtue of physically connecting one recreational trail to another, if this sort of trail, this path, can socially connect or integrate two very, very different cultural, economic, social differences. Right, Joe?
That's correct, sir.
All right, so you're like, when am I going to get some dinner?
Click the record button.
What?
I really hope I clicked the record
Oh,
button.
that's all right. You know, I can talk. That was the hard thing about that proposal, was getting that many words in. Oh yeah, I think I used up all but 4 minutes of the